Thank you everyone for joining us today to discuss how you can analyze our impact during this current year to accelerate your performance in the future. I'm Amy Fowler. It's my honor to serve as a leader coach with Huron Student Education. And during our time together, we're going to be having an opportunity where you can enter any questions, thoughts, or ideas you might have in the chat box. We have student education team members that will be interacting with your questions and comments in that format. At Studer, our work is dedicated to uplifting the Studer Education 9 principles to support organizational excellence. And with these principles as our core focus, what we do is support our partner organizations in developing a success-based organizational culture, one that is driven by evidence. The 9 principles identify the leader beliefs and practices that maximize performance, support organizational excellence, and are essential in creating that success-based culture. It's possible that your organization has defined your own core principles for how you will achieve excellence. I suspect if you have, they align well with the principles that guide our work. If you have not yet adopted principles to guide your leadership work, consider ours because they've proven to be effective in elevating excellence. Today, we're going to focus primarily on 2 strategies. First, we're going to focus on principle 2, measuring the important things. Here we want to think about how we encourage ourselves to continuously track our progress to achieve results and keep an improvement mindset. We're also going to focus in on principle 7, how we align our behaviors with our goals and values. This helps us to have consistent practices that move our organization forward in a positive direction. Peter Drucker reminds us what we want to do is follow effective action with quiet reflection. And with quiet reflection comes even more effective action. So in today's activities, I'm going to ask you to do some reflecting on your own. We're going to use a really high-tech way of catching notes. I'm going to ask you to take a sheet of paper, literally old school sheet and paper, and create a note catcher that looks something like this. In the upper corner, a P, in the next corner over a D, coming down below an S with a little question mark and a blank space next to it. And then last, a place for the A. You can use any note paper you have, Post-its, just don't do it on a computer. And the reason we don't want you to do it on a computer is once you start typing, this puts your brain in a place where you tend to engage in more final draft thinking and you spend more time editing than you do brainstorming. So let's take about 10, 15 seconds to get that paper together as we get ready to move on and engage in some reflection today. All right, now if you don't have your paper quite ready, we'll have some time as we keep going in our reflection. Most of you are probably aware of the Plan, Do, Study, Act process that's often used in continuous improvement. When we're talking about system level improvement, we don't always use those exact same letters, but we do start by defining a problem, then we take action, then we monitor and validate what happened as a result of our actions, and then we adjust our plans. We're going to go through some examples and engage in reflection together. So remember, you'll have time to take some notes of your own. The first stage in this cycle is to plan. Here we want to think about what we're trying to accomplish and also what success will look like. And so most of us do this on an annual basis as leaders in our organizations. Last year, you were probably in a position where you were thinking about what would happen in this next school year. And we're going to use 2 examples to help us illuminate what happens in the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle. We'll use these same examples all the way through. So perhaps you were in a position last year to plan. In planning, you realized that even prior to the pandemic, the students that you were serving had greater and greater social emotional needs. And you expected that it would be even greater returning from the pandemic. Another example, perhaps you had higher than usual turnover in your staff, and you knew that you were struggling to replace them. The labor market just wasn't bringing enough candidates to your door. In that upper corner, what you're going to do is right here, say, what did you plan to address? And just write a quick note. We're only going to take about 10 seconds for that. Great. So now that you have that idea, the next step in any of these processes is to then actually do something about the problem you're trying to solve. So continuing with our examples, perhaps when you were thinking about your students' social emotional needs, you had two major strategies. One, to hire more counselors to provide direct support to students with greater need, but also a second strategy to provide some teacher professional development so that you could provide a universal or tier one support for all students in the classroom. And in the example of having a difficult time finding the candidates you need for your positions, you had two strategies: one, to offer a signing bonus, and two, to implement a new employee onboarding program. So those are two strategies for each of the problems that we described. What I'd like you to do now is write down a couple of your significant strategies. What were the things that you were thinking you might do this year to solve the problem that you wrote on your sheet? For this one, I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to write down those ideas. Great. So now that you've recorded a few of the significant strategies, the next question we want to think about is, what does this look like to know we're being successful? During the do phase, you want to think ahead about what it is will indicate your success. Perhaps what you said is, if you were providing, and I'm taking just one strategy here, providing teacher professional development, you thought, well, I'll be successful if I can offer 20 professional development hours to my teachers, have 90% of them trained, and of those who are trained, they have an overall positive evaluation for how useful the session is at 80%. But I'm not just satisfied with knowing that I offered the training. I want to see it being used. So I do classroom walkthroughs and I look for the strategy to be used. In the fall, I think about 50% of teachers will be using it in the classrooms I observe. And in the spring, I'm hoping that will be up to 70%. In our other example, for the employee onboarding, we might say that our targets are to create an onboarding team, train 100% of our supervisors in how to conduct a 30 and 90-day interview, a process that helps us to understand how our new employees are experiencing our organization, and then intervene before they've reached a point where they're dissatisfied with their workplace. I also want to know that 90% of those meetings happened within 10 days of when they were supposed to. And as a result of that, I'm hoping that 80% of our new hires will tell us that they intend to stay. These are examples of metrics that help us know along the way, are we achieving what we set out to do? And they're helping us have a vision of what success will look like. So the question is, picking your strategy, just one of those strategies. How did you, or might you now, define what success looks like in achieving that strategy? Put down just a couple of notes on the edge of your paper in the do section. Thank you. In the study phase, we now want to check how things have gone against the metrics that we set up in the do stage. So in our first example, we may find results something like this. We were very successful in offering our training. Most of our teachers got trained, 95%, and 89% said it was positive. But when we did our walkthroughs, we saw that it wasn't being used in the classrooms we visited. In the fall, we'd hoped to see 50% of our teachers using it, but we only saw it 25% of the time. In the spring, it increased to 50%, but our goal was 70%. Similarly, in the employee onboarding goal, we did create our onboarding team and trained all of our supervisors in how to do those 30 and 90-day interviews. However, when we looked at the implementation, we found that only 40% of the 30-day and 90-day meetings were held within 10 days of the window, and our target had been 90%, not even half. And while 85% of the folks we interviewed said they planned to return, we're not really sure how to make sense of that because we only interviewed 40%, not nearly the 90% we were hoping to. And so this is the moment where most of us are starting to plan for the future already. We're coming up with conclusions about what the next step will be. We're going to encourage you to stop and not act on that quite yet. Perhaps you've seen this diagram. It comes from Corporate Rebels, and it's an illustration that depicts a study that was done by Yoshida in 1989. In that study, Yoshida found that staff could describe a wide range of problems that they faced as they did their job on the front line. And as he interviewed team members that had increasing responsibilities in leadership, the percentage of awareness of those same problems decreased dramatically, so that executives only saw 4% of the problems that the frontline staff were experiencing. As leaders in your organization, it's incredibly likely that your understanding of how problems are experienced by your frontline staff, your teachers, your cafeteria workers, your bus drivers, the way that they see the problem is not going to be the same way you do. And so before you make your next step on what to do to solve this problem, it's time to get a bit more information. In this phase of the study phase, we want to figure out exactly what the obstacle is. So in the teacher professional development plan, before I make an adjustment, I might ask that my principals lead a plus delta with our teachers to understand from their perspective the reason that we're not seeing higher implementation. Perhaps through that plus delta, we may learn that the teachers find that there simply was too much theory in the professional development, not enough practical application. Or perhaps we might find that it's a time of day problem. The teachers actually find they're using the strategies a lot, but they're using them mostly in the afternoon, and all of our walkthroughs were in the morning. I'm not sure what we might find, but asking the teachers their perspective will help me understand it better. Likewise, in the employee onboarding example, we might jump to a conclusion that our managers just don't want to do these interviews and they didn't find them useful. But if we do rounding, we have our onboarding team go complete rounds with supervisors, we might learn from their perspective the actual obstacles to holding the meetings. Perhaps it was a time crunch. Maybe people didn't feel as well prepared to handle those meetings as we thought they were. I'm not sure what we'll find out, but by talking to the people carrying out the work, we'll have a better understanding of what we should do. So at this point, what I'd like you to do is go to the study section and think here in your study section, do you currently have the data that you need in order to know how well you've succeeded? And if not, how might you gather that? And also, on what area do you need more information from your team members? What's a question that you have, and who should you ask that question of? And I'll give you about 30 seconds to write down some notes and think about what data you need and what you need to know more about. One of my favorite authors is Peter Senge. He's the author of The Fifth Discipline in Schools That Learn. And he says, the key to success isn't just thinking about what we are doing, but doing something about what we are thinking. This is the time where we need to look and think about what we learned in order to make the best decisions moving forward. At this phase, we call it adjusting. And here's where we're getting ready to return back to planning. Before we move to planning, we need to think about what our future action would be. In some cases, we're going to abandon an initiative. This is going to happen when we say, quite frankly, that didn't work. And we know it didn't work because of the evidence that we gathered in the study phase. And we also do not see a way that that strategy could be improved and result in improvement. This does not happen very often. Most commonly, we'll adjust or refine our work. This is where we can start to see that something is starting to work. We see positive points where it's happening in some classrooms, but not others, with some leaders and not others. This is the time where we decide the way to get even better will be to deepen our commitment, remove obstacles that prevent us from engaging in the work, or simply improve the utilization by having more people participate in improving our processes. And every once in a while, we're really lucky and we can hardwire the work. We say we did it, we've been successful, we achieved what we hoped to. And here we need to continue our good work by consistently onboarding our new employees to help them know that this is how we do things in our organization. And as leaders, we need to continue to validate that the techniques are being utilized across the board. Otherwise, we run the risk that people will think that this is no longer important to us, and the very great practice that we perfected last year will go by the wayside and no longer be helping us to improve. In our examples, we might find something like this. When we did our plus deltas, we learned from the teachers that they asked for more practical information and not just the theory. So we adjust. This year, we'll spend more of our professional development plan having teachers share their implementation stories and their classroom-based resources so that others can learn from their examples. But we'll continue the effort to deepen our commitment to social emotional supports. In our employee onboarding example, what we found out was that principals said, I just can't do this with all the employees at the same time because they're all hired at the same time. It's too much to do at once. So we understand that we can change this. The 30 and 90-day interview, it's really about checking in with people early and then checking in with them before too much time has passed. So we can change the name to entry and mid-year interviews. And we can also train the assistant principals to support this effort, so it's not all on principals. This would be an example of adjusting, but maintaining the effort towards supporting the 30 and 90-day interviews. Now, your example is going to stay blank because you haven't gotten to that point yet of collecting additional interview information. Now, Senge also says the world is made of circles and we tend to think in straight lines. So of course, today I've presented to you in a very linear way how we might engage in plan, do, study, act, or study, adjust. And it involves many, many circles. At the end of the day, your paper might look something like this, and it's intentionally not neat and it's intentionally messy. You might think about doing something like this in a staff meeting. You might give folks about 45 minutes of time, with certainly more time to reflect and write down notes than what I said here. But the goal is not to come out with a polished document that others will share and publish. It is more to get people thinking about, how do I use the data that's in front of me? How do I make sure that I check in with someone else and ask them for their insights, particularly if they're the ones who are going to carry out the work before I make my next plan for improvement. So here we are back at the beginning, and we're getting ready to plan for next year. Looking backwards to last year, what did you intend to monitor? What did you intend to improve? How did you go about it? What were those results? And then what should you do next to either abandon, adjust, or hardwire the improvement effort that you made? I want to thank you for being a learning partner with us today. Please feel free to reach out to Studer Education if there's any way that we can be of assistance to you and your team. And we wish you the very best as you continue your efforts towards building organizational excellence and inspiring those who you lead.